Hi, I'm Colette Bancroft, the book editor of the Tampa Bay Times, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the virtual Times Festival of Reading. Our guest tonight is Michael Connelly, who grew up in Florida, worked as a crime reporter in Los Angeles, and about 30 years ago began writing fiction full-time. He's published 36 novels and one nonfiction book, selling more than 80 million copies worldwide. His series of books about LAPD detective Harry Bosch was the source for the Amazon TV series Bosch and for an upcoming Untitled spin-off series on IMDb TV. His first book about Bosch's half-brother Mickey Haller, the Lincoln lawyer, became a movie, and there's now an upcoming Netflix series of the same title about that character. Connolly's been an executive producer and writer for all three series, all while writing 1 or 2 novels a year. His latest book, The Dark Hours, published today, is his fourth about LAPD detective Renee, Ballard. We're thrilled to be here to help him launch it. We'll be taking questions from the audience in a little while, so please enter your questions in the chat for Michael to respond to. Michael, welcome. Welcome to the festival.
I'm glad to be with you virtually.
Yes.
I have to say, virtually, I keep getting this blip on my screen saying I have a bad connection. So hopefully we'll make it.
Oh boy. Okay, everybody cross your fingers. All right, let's get to the questions. You set your novels in the year that they're published. And we talked last year about your book, The Law of Innocence, and that because of the pandemic, you had to sort of back up on that book and rewrite portions of it. Because of the pandemic. With The Dark Hours begins on the stroke of midnight at the beginning of 2021, with the last year behind it of the pandemic and the summer protests sparked by George Floyd's murder. Can you talk about how those events affect Renee Ballard, the main character of the book, both professionally and personally?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is the 4th time I've written about Renee, and I like all the titles to be refer to her midnight shift, the dark, so the dark hours. But I think it's also the dark hours of American policing in some way after last year. So, you know, so I was playing around with that, and you know, as you say, you know, I'm always reflecting what's going on. So I felt I really couldn't.
It looks like we have a little bit of a technical glitch. Hold on 1 minute, and we'll see if we can resolve it. And keep talking with Michael Connelly. The wonders of technology.
Does that resolve it?
That does resolve it. It's like he's really here.
Virtually.
This is the best Zoom call I've ever seen.
Yeah, good to see you in person. It's been a while.
It's great to see you in person. Welcome back to Florida.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
And for the festival and at Tombolo Books. Great.
We're all great to see.
Getting back to some normalcy.
Yes. Yeah. More than welcome normalcy.
So you want me to start over?
Yeah.
Well, I was just talking about how when I decided early on to call this Dark Hours as a reference to the midnight shift that Ballard works, but then I was getting the correlation that, you know, since the protests of George Floyd, I know this starts on the stroke of midnight, but 6 days later we have the Capitol insurrection and all that. It just seemed like that throw in the pandemic and you got some dark hours.
Yes, you do.
And in a metaphoric way. So that's where that title came from. And as you've mentioned, my books are always set in the year that they're published. And so, you know, it's a choice that every writer makes. Like, do you include something like the pandemic? But to me, it would stand out if I didn't, because of the body of work leading up to this always reflect on whatever happened,
right?
9/11, you know, whatever. And so I felt to keep doing what I've been doing, I had no choice but to bring that all into it. And I'm not heavy-handed about it, but it's a, you know, I was really interested in how, George Floyd and what effect that would have on someone like Ballard, who is a tried and true, relentless, fierce person looking to right wrongs. And she's in a department that has really been hit hard by this in terms of moving from being a very proactive department to the point of doing things wrong and making mistakes to being totally reactive and back on their heels and not a lot going on. And that's not the way Renee operates. So on one hand, I'm reflecting what's going on. On the other, when you're writing, about a character, you want to throw obstacles in front of the character all the time. And this is like a real obstacle that's out there in the world. So why not take advantage of it and use it?
Right. Yeah. Given what Renee does, where she lives, and her job, you really couldn't not write about the pandemic, not write about protests, not write about all of that turmoil, because it's what she's dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, the book just came out today, so I haven't done a lot of interviews, but it's usually one of the first questions. But what if I didn't do it? That would still be the first question. Like, why did you, change the way you've been writing for 30 years and not include this big thing that was going on in the world?
Yeah. And so it has an impact, obviously, on the city of Los Angeles, on the police department, but it also affects her personally, partly in the way she sort of lives her life, where she lives, what she, when she's off duty. And it also, it's affecting her, as you say, she's this kind of fierce, hardcore, dedicated cop and has been up to now, but this is the first time we've seen her, doubting things.
Yeah, she's definitely, as a malaise falls over the department and she struggles to work in a department like that, she's facing this question: is this the best place for me to be here? And very much like Harry Bosch, who have always said he's a man on a mission, or Ballard's a woman on a mission. And so they both at different times in their series, ask the question: is this how I carry out my mission, or is this not the best way to do it? And for the first time, we're seeing her, wondering if this is the right way to do this. And of course, other things change, which I enjoy doing. I've written a few books with her, going on the beach and all that stuff. Well, the pandemic closed the beaches, so that was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
She had to get an apartment, and that's a fun thing to do in the writing, and it's been a while, and I put in that her beloved dog Lola had passed on, and so it's about her getting a new dog, and that kind of stuff I think is important to the character. She even gets into a romance this time, so I really did a lot of different things with her, and and I think that's either a subconscious or a very conscious way of saying I want to keep her going and keep her alive in literary terms, so that I can write about her some more.
Yeah, keep her changing. Yeah, and her moving into an apartment also produces a couple of sort of funny scenes because she's not used to having neighbors.
Yeah, and having to deal with nosy people and stuff like that.
Right. She sort of rubs up against them a little bit, and it's a lighter conflict, but a little bit of a conflict. As you say, she's, because of everything that's happened and because of the sort of general malaise in the department that she's seen, she is thinking about, what my mission is. And the two things in this book, the two cases that she's working. One is, the first murder of the new year, basically a guy named Javier Rafa. And the other is a case she was working before the new year, but that she continues to work, which is a team of serial rapists, two men that she's kind of called, given the name the Midnight Men. And those two cases are her motive to keep going. Those are the things that move her. Why are those cases so resonant for Ballard?
Well, I think she gets empathic connections to both cases for different reasons. In the Rafa case, this is a guy who she finds out actually bought his way out of a gang to go down a straight and narrow life and try to keep his family, his son in particular, out of gangs. And, that was a noble thing for him to do. And then he ends up getting killed for whatever reason. And, so that connects her to, it's Harry who says everybody counts when nobody counts, but it's also in her DNA. And so you have that. And then just the other one, if you go back in history, it's not really mentioned in this book. I don't carry a lot of the history forward, but she is a victim in some way. She's not even sure if she was sexually assaulted, but it's in her mind at all times. And so I think she has a very empathic, sympathetic, whatever you want to call it, connection to, a victim of sexual violence. And then there's the rarity of this. I mean, that whole storyline was inspired by an FBI report I saw where about how rare it is to have like a tag team of people with the same kind of virulent view of women and the world, and that they work together to commit these crimes. But it does happen enough that I can't remember the acronym in the book, but the FBI has an acronym for this when like-minded psychopaths connects. And what I'm positing in the book is that now there's a great place for them to connect, and that's the dark web. And so again, I'm probably, that's probably a broken record for me. I've gone into the dark web a few times in my books, but it remains something that intrigues me and scares me and all those things. And that's usually where you draw some of your plotting from.
Right. Yeah, that part of that plot line about the Midnight Man just gets more and more horrifying as it goes along, as we learn about them. I don't want to say anything about what's horrifying, but it's horrifying. I know that sometimes you mentioned the FBI report. I know that sometimes plots for your books come from some real events, stories in the news. And I wonder if that's the case for the other main crime in this book, for the kind of.
We have to start over. No one heard anything.
Okay, well, welcome. This is you got to go back in and come out again.
Yeah.
Oops. Now I forgot where I was. Oh, whether the Rafa case was based. We hear those stories about people shooting up in the air on New Year's Eve and people being hit by the bullets. Was that story inspired by a real case?
Ballard connects the Rafa case to an older case that Harry Bosch worked and never cleared when he was still a detective. So the case that Bosch worked is very much based on a real case. And the detective told me about it. And it just really interested me. And so I kind of worked backwards from there. I gave Bosch that case and then created this new one with these sympathies and so forth. And it's funny how things bleed together. We happen to be filming the new Bosch show at a car frame repair shop. And I just like the layout of it. And so I use that for the story in the book. That was Rafa's business.
Yeah, I want to come back around to that. But first I want to ask you about Bosch in this book. As you say, her case connects to his case. And so the two of them start working together again, as they have done before. And Harry's reaction, it seems to me, to the pandemic, I was kind of surprised. I mean, it makes sense, but he seems to have really kind of isolated himself and withdrawn. And I always think of Bosch on the street. Someone should add up how many pages you've written about Bosch driving the map of Los Angeles. And now he's really, she has to go to him to talk about this case. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, about your process of coming to that reaction for Bosch.
Yeah, I mean, let me back up because we talked about my last book last year. And I think I said when you were interviewing me, my goal was, I mean, I don't outline books, I just have ideas and I start doing it. So on the Law of Innocence, my idea was that Mickey Haller would never leave a jail cell, and I couldn't sustain that. Eventually he gets out on bail and so on. So this one, so not achieving my goal on that, this time I thought Bosch is never going to leave his house, because his answer to the pandemic is just don't go out.
Yeah.
Don't even go out to get a vaccine. Just don't go out and won't get it. And so, you know, in the initial stages of writing that book, you know, the first few times we see him, he's in his house. She comes, as you say, she comes to him, and you know, but once again, I couldn't sustain that. And it's probably because of what you said. Harry Bosch is a guy, this man of the streets, or whatever. Yeah, we had to get him out there. I had to get him in the car with Ballard so they could do their thing together. So it was probably like a really dumb idea in the beginning, because it didn't last that. But I like the, you know, again, remember, it was the first of the year. Like now, you know, there weren't any vaccines.
Yeah, it was before vaccines.
You know, and I mean, vaccines are coming out, but not like everyone was getting them. So he qualified because he's, you know, over 65. But it took, I guess I shouldn't be giving all this away, it's in the book, but it takes Ballard to drive him to Dodger Stadium to get his shot.
Yeah, I was worried about him there for a while. Yeah.
It'd be a good way to end the series. Dies of COVID.
I'm glad you didn't make that choice.
Yeah.
The spoiler alert, but Harry does not die of COVID. I guess on the next book, you're going to have to try to do something where Ballard doesn't leave her apartment or something.
Yeah, that'll be the goal.
That'll be even harder. As I said, I wanted to circle back around to the TV shows, and you've at this point, there's been a 7-season Bosch series about Bosch on the force as a detective. And now there are these 2 upcoming shows, one about the Lincoln lawyer, his brother Mickey Ballard, and then one, a spin-off of the Bosch series, but Harry has left the force. And I wonder if you can tell us something about them, but also, is there an interaction, just going back to what you said about the tow yard, and you know, you like the set, and so it sort of worked its way into this book. How much has that interaction grown as you've done more of the TV stuff? Has it kind of crept into the books more? Yeah,
a lot, I think. I mean, obviously the books are, I mean, the shows are drawn from the books, but stuff happens in the you know, the show that I like, you know, and I can take it back into the books. In this book, his daughter Maddie is you know, becoming a cop. Yeah. And in the new spin-off show, she's already a cop. So so the books used to be ahead of the show, and in that instance, the show's gonna be ahead of the books. Yeah. But yeah, I just feel it's like a two-way street, and which is one of the fun things to do.
Yeah. Both of the new shows are already wrapped. Tell us first about the Lincoln Lawyer.
So Lincoln Lawyer show is, we take a little bit from the original book, but there was a movie. Right. So we're very conscious of not telling that story again. So we take a little bit from it and twist it. So it's a little different, but that's not the main story. The main story comes from the second book, which is called The Brass Verdict. And it's you know, it's pretty well to that story. Yeah. And except, I don't know if you remember this, but Harry Bosch plays a big part in that book. Yeah. And you know, Lincoln Lawyer's at Netflix, Bosch is at Amazon. So, you know, these are public enemies, you know? So it's weird. I have a foot in both camps, but the rights will cross over. So the Lincoln Lawyer has a Detective Riggs who was created to play the role that was Bosch in the books. And in the show, the spin-off show, we're really concentrating on 3 characters: Bosch, of course, Money Chandler, the attorney, and Bosch's daughter, Maddie. And so we concentrated on a story where Chandler kind of takes the role in the book, from the book that was Mickey Hall.
Oh, yeah.
See, I'm getting confused myself.
I know.
Yeah.
And the spin-off series, does the spin-off series have a title?
It does, but it's top secret. I'm sworn not to tell it because they want to make a big announcement about it, I think next week. So just stand by.
Okay.
I mean, it's going to be underwhelming, you know, to just wait for just a title. But
Yeah.
nowadays in Hollywood, they try to make hay out of everything.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But that show, the first season of the show, I think, on the Bosch series, often you took plot lines from more than one of the novels and sort of wove them together.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, this season of the spinoff, first season of the spinoff, is based on The Wrong Side of Goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had some leftover stuff from the seventh season of the old show.
Mhm.
And even though this is a spinoff, we carry that forward. Some unfinished business that involves our three characters. We had to find ways of, it's a true three-hander. I mean, they all have about equal screen time.
Yeah.
But we had to find ways of getting them crossing paths and so forth. So there's a carryover from the last season of Bosch.
Yeah. Money was kind of out of commission at that point.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the storyline, and so we have that, and then we have The Wrong Side of Goodbye, which is a very PI type story. So that was what we elected to do because we really wanted to delineate that Bosch no longer has a badge and so forth.
Right.
And what's interesting in the books, he's never gotten an office. He's kind of worked out of his house and did things, followed cases he wanted to follow. He wasn't like a PI, private eye for hire. And he's not really that way now, but he does have an office. And so it's really interesting, I think, to go down that road. You know, it's very, very LA, the noir private eye thing.
Chandler.
And so we're fully embracing that, where in the books I didn't do that.
Yeah. You brought the pandemic and all of those other things into this book. Does any of that come into either the Bosch spinoff or the Lincoln Lawyer?
No, I just got to think about that. Definitely not a Lincoln Lawyer, but I think, I mean, it's not a storyline, but you'll see people wearing masks and stuff like that.
Okay.
But it's not something, because it's actually set, even though we were filming in the future. It's set in August and September of this year, but we started filming in June. So, you know, we were praying that there wasn't some kind of big thing.
Yeah.
That happened.
Yeah.
And Delta happened in that period, so we're going like, oh no.
Yeah.
But
you acknowledge them
a little bit,
without making it a major thing. Who plays the Lincoln Lawyer?
A Mexican American actor named Manuel Garcia Rufo, and he's somewhat recognizable. He's been in a lot of movies, but it was interesting because you know, it's somewhat iconic that Matthew McConaughey is the guy in the movie, so they wanted to really break from that. And the guy in the books is Mexican American, and you know, his mother was a Mexican telenovela star and things like that. And they really like that as a way of really breaking free of people tuning in to see Matthew McConaughey. I think they'll have a little bit of a shock. But anyway, he's really good. And as you said, it's wrapped, it's in the can, as you say. And you know, obviously I've seen it. It's a good show.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with it. So.
But we don't have drop dates for either of these shows yet.
No, I think they're both. I you know, it's probably a little bit of people playing chicken, like, you know, who they don't want to come out at the same time, and waiting for someone to one side or the other to name a date. The best I can say is I think it's going to be March, April, May for both of them, but I don't know because I don't have dates or know which one's first or anything like that.
Yeah, and of course, in Bosch, Titus Welliver is back in the Bosch.
Yeah.
And
he's great as usual. He and I wrote the last episode, which we just finished filming a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And so that was a new thing, a new trick. So 8 seasons in, we've been working together. I was going to his house on the weekends to write the script and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was fun.
Yeah.
And I think we wrote a good script together.
Good. Yeah, he'd never written before for the.
Not for the show.
For the show.
You know, he's written some plays and stuff.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, he's really inhabited that role.
yeah.
I remember when he started playing it, there were readers, loyal readers who said, no, that's not how I imagined Bosch. And I think I can't think of the one that he didn't convert.
Yeah, that's what I always said was just give it a try,
Mhm.
and see what you think.
Yeah.
And I would respect people saying it's not my Bosch. It's okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think he's, as you say, his conversion rate is very high.
Yeah, I think so. Going forward, as you said, Bosch and Mickey can't meet. They're separate universes. But what about Ballard?
She can meet either one of them if one of those big studios said, here's some money, let's do it. So she's the last character I don't have spoken for, and I've been so lucky. And, I got 2 things going, so I'm happy to bide my time. Maybe that will happen after these shows are over or whatever.
Mhm.
So I'm not in a big hurry to send her into Hollywood either.
Yeah.
Because you can also be worried about too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you still think of her as yet another show?
It could be, yeah. I mean, it's funny though, the realities of production, the dark hours, she works the midnight shift. That's a lot of working at night, and that filters into whether people want to be on a show. Not on both sides of the camera, crew and all that stuff. Like the episode that Titus and I wrote, and we just finished filming. What was I thinking? I had a lot of nighttime stuff, and so the last 4 days of the show, we all worked from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. It's a killer. It wrecks your life, and so I have that hesitation about the character. That's her job.
Yeah.
So
you can't suddenly put her on the day shift.
Yeah.
Let me ask you before we switch over to audience questions, because I'm sure there's plenty. What's the next book?
Okay, so this book is not like a spoiler, but we've kind of talked about Ballard's questioning, is this the best path for me? So it kind of ends with that question. And so the next book answers that question.
So it's another Ballard.
It's Ballard and Bosch. Yeah. It's funny. The next book answers that question, but I would say Ballard's the protagonist of The Dark Hours, and Bosch is a supporting character. I'm going to flip that. Even though Ballard's question is answered, it's going to be a Bosch story.
Sure. And have you already started that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't have the title yet.
Yeah.
You always want the titles.
I know.
The Dark Hours I had pretty early, but you can kind of tell when you read this book. The first title I have is The Midnight Man, but that's been used many times, especially in romance novels. So I dropped that and went to The Dark Hours.
Yeah. Titles are hard.
Yeah.
And your titles are always. I love the fact that your titles almost always reflect more than one thing in the book. And that's like a high degree of difficulty.
Yeah, if you can get that. I don't think I've gotten it every time, but I totally go into thinking about titles and so that they mean something different at different times.
Right. And in your spare time, are you up to anything else? I know you've been doing podcasts.
I don't have any spare time. I got podcasts, I got a TV show, but it just wrapped. So right now I have nothing in production. So I'm going to really get going. I only just started the next book, but that will feel like a vacation. I just have to stay at home and start writing that.
Right. So are you going to stick around in Florida for a little while?
Yeah, well, that's true. At least through Thanksgiving.
Yeah, because you spent most of the last couple of years in Los Angeles. I know.
Yeah, other than a quick trip to the Stanley Cup Finals in Tampa, I've been in LA for like 18, 20 months, so whatever it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're glad you're here.
It's good to be back.
Yeah.
It's good to see this great new store.
Yes. Yes, and thanks to Tombolo Books. I'll come back around to that. But, thanks for helping us pull off this little ruse. And I guess, do we have some audience questions?
We do have some audience questions. Many of our listeners right now are having a little bit of a hard time with the audio if they're not using earbuds, so or headphones of some sort. So it seems like some people are great, some people aren't. But just so you know, if you can get a little closer to the mic when we get going here.
Okay.
There are many fans who just want you to know how happy they are. But I'm going to take you back to the podcast real fast because we just had a question about it, or two of them actually. One person wants to know more, to give them the title, and another wants to know if there will be another murder case on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm taking. It's interesting. The first two seasons of the podcast, it was called Murder Book, and then I did one. There were some rights issues on the story I wanted to tell, so the next one is just called The Wonderland Murders and the Secret History of Hollywood, and that's on Audible, and that's the one that just finished. And so I'm in this stage of taking a breath and thinking about what I'll do next and how I'll do it, whether I'll do it under the umbrella of Murder Book or not.
Very cool. A lot of character questions here. So a handful you might have gotten to as we went, but what is the most important thing Harry has learned from his time with Renee Ballard?
The most important thing, I don't know, trust. Harry's a guy who doesn't really trust anybody, especially his partners when he was a cop. And I think he's really, it comes through admiration and this kind of shared outlook at the job. I think he can totally trust. He knows now he can totally trust Renee. So that means in the next book I have to shatter that. I'm serious. You can't have a good thing last too
long. Will you be bringing other characters together again, such as Jack McAvoy and Harry Bosch?
Yeah, anything can happen. I don't have that on the drawing board or anything right now, but that's because I don't have a drawing board, which means anything can happen. So I'll be writing a story and I'll bring somebody in or I'll bring somebody back, some obscure character. And that's a lot of the fun I have is when that kind of stuff comes up in my head, and I go, oh, this is perfect to bring in so-and-so or whatever. So anything can happen is the basic answer to that.
Any thoughts about doing a prequel on Bosch's rookie years?
Yeah, anything can happen. No, but I said in the books he became a cop in '72, and that was a really interesting year in LA. And I've planted seeds about like the Patty Hearst case and things, the SLA shootout. Big things happened in '72, and so I do, to use a journalist phrase, I've been gathering string for a long time, but it's going to take a leap of faith on my part to go back and do what I would consider a historical, to go back 50 years. And so it's always a question of, am I up to doing that? And but I have a whole shelf of books from that are about that era. And I always thought it would be something that when I'm nearing the end of the line with Harry, I could always go back and tell his origin story as a cop or a Vietnam story or something like that. So it's always good to have that in your back pocket as a possibility.
Will there be a series featuring Maddie Bosch?
A series? Well, she's featured in a new show in a big way, and she's great. I've really been drawn to that. Maybe it's because it's 7 years of Bosch as the point
stories. And so with this new show, to write pretty significant or deep plot lines for her. And, you know, and before she was like a teenager, and it's hard to kind of get that going. Now she's we jumped from the end of the Bosch show to what we're doing in the spinoff. We jumped almost 20 months. And so at the end of the Bosch show, she's applying, but we're not doing all like she's in the academy or anything like that. She's on the street as a cop when we meet her in the new show. And it's pretty cool. How we meet her and the things that she does.
Who would play Renee Ballard?
Anything can happen. I don't know. Yeah, I'm so busy with these two things that I just haven't really thought about that. But I think there's so I'm talking like a Hollywood guy now, but it's the facts of life in Hollywood. There's so much content out there. There's so many platforms. There's like 10 different streaming things you can have. So the way to kind of cut through the clutter is to really get, if you're going to have a single lead show like a Renee Ballard show, would be to get somebody really good and that's already kind of made a mark in the business, either in TV or films or whatever. And when you do these short shows that are only 10 episodes, a lot of film actors and actresses are interested in that kind of stuff because they can still do a film a year and a 10 episode show.
We have
Zoe
another.
Kravitz. I'll just throw out a name.
Oh, that's good.
That's a good one. Another Ballard question. How did you come up with her as a character?
Single source inspiration. I know a detective, and she worked the midnight shift and told me about her experiences, and the light bulb immediately went on over my head. And I didn't start writing right away, but I started spending more time and asking her about her experiences. Then I started writing, as opposed to Harry Bosch, whose inspiration comes from all over the place. Real cops I knew as a reporter, and movies, books. Steve McQueen was a big influence, and then a real cop that was an LAPD homicide detective was equally as inspirational. So he came from all over. Ballard comes from one person.
We've got some craft questions here. How do you arrive at your plots? And once you decide on a plot, how long does it take you to develop the whole story?
I always have stuff in different levels of, coming along, or it's time to write. I'm always throwing out of that. I spend a lot of time with kind of people I write about, detectives or defense lawyers, and I get inspired by hearing a story orally. We hear someone tell a story about an experience they had, and you can get their emotions and so forth when they tell it about themselves. And that's usually the point of inspiration for me. And, it's not like I get something and then turn around and start writing a book about it. I have this constantly going on, and I might go home and take notes, and I might not come back to that for 3 or 4 years. But it usually all starts with someone telling me a story.
Along those lines, is writing easy for you? And I will pair that with, what do you do on a day that you're supposed to be writing but can't get it going?
Well, I've written about some characters like Harry Bosch. I'm coming up on 30 years. In January is the 30th anniversary of my first book. So there's things about writing Harry Bosch that are easy, but at the same time, you cannot be static from book to book. So now I'm 20 some books into this character, and I have to come up with new stuff. So that the digging into character never gets easy, but other aspects, like him driving around and him nodding all the time. There's aspects of character that I, know by heart. And so that part, it can be easy. I never really, because in journalism, there's no such thing as writer's block. You know, you just got to write. You can't go to your editor and say, I don't have it today, boss. I'll see you tomorrow. You know, you have to write. And so I had that training. So I never really had quote unquote writer's block, but I've had hard days. And usually what I do is go back to something I've already written. I go back a couple chapters and I rewrite them. And that kind of gives you momentum to get through it's like taking a battering ram. You swing back and then you go through the door. So I go back into what I've already written, start rewriting, and it gives me momentum to get through the block.
We have someone here who read a note that you are auctioning off a character in the next book. Does it have to be a person, and can it be a local organization?
No, it could be an organization, I think.
It was a very specific question for someone who's into books for
Yeah,
troops.
it's interesting. Does it say there what the organization is?
Books
I
for
probably should
troops.
ask it that. What's that?
Books for troops.
Oh, well, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, I mean, I have an auction for books for troops. Homes for
there you go.
troops. Homes for troops.
You do a lot. You auction off a lot of character names and stuff. You do that pretty often.
I usually do three characters a book because it can end up controlling things, you know, and then because the internet is everywhere, you'll get a name and it's like so hard to use. Like, yeah, I can't even pronounce them sometimes. And then I have to figure out how to put this into an LA story, you know, so sometimes it backfires, but it also, you know, is helpful to a lot of organizations.
A couple of you talked a little bit already about how you feel about Titus, and but there are questions about how do you feel about the casting of bringing your characters to life on TV? Do you think it's usually well cast, and what is your creative input there? Do you get to choose?
I think our casting people have been excellent, and I've extracted myself from that. You know, you should know your limitations. I came to this as a book writer, not someone who's made films or TV. So it was after the first year, like I had a big hand in casting Titus, and I thought I hit a home run there. So why be involved? I'm just the guy who cast Titus, so that I'll leave it at that. And even that was, you know, I put his name in. I saw him in something, and I thought he was an actor who could show inner baggage, damage, whatever you want to call it. And he ended up getting the job, and I was the first one to mention what about him. So I felt pretty good about that. I felt I had earned my stripes as a producer. But pretty much since then, I have not been involved because I don't really know the subtleties. I know good acting when I see it, just like you do and anybody that does, but there's a higher level of understanding that in the business, and I don't have that experience, so I don't weigh into all that stuff. And I've never been, you know, disappointed. I think we get some really good people.
We have a question about how do you develop philosophies like Harry's everybody counts or nobody counts?
It's funny, I can't remember that. You know, it wasn't in the first book. I think it was in the third book. And, you know, you kind of write stream of conscious, you put stuff in. Obviously, it was in his DNA in the first book. But it took me 3 books to get to the shorthand embodiment of it. And put it in the book, and it's almost like a blur. You know, who knew it would like last and become his moniker and all that kind of stuff. You know, but it's a good philosophy for a cop. I think, you know, we wouldn't have had George Floyd if all the cops had that viewpoint. So just kind of happened.
A handful of questions here about the new show, because there are some people who have never heard about it and they would love for you to tell them more. Where's it going to be? When is it going to be?
We talked about when, I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
next year. My guess is sometime between March and June, it will come out. It's on IMDb, which is owned by Amazon, but it's a free streaming service. I think it's going to get renamed, rebranded, and the Bosch show will come out kind of as part of that rebranding.
All right, I'm hoping that satisfies everyone who was taken aback.
Yeah, the spinoff, you started working on the spinoff really almost as soon as you finished with Bosch. You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that kind of took its toll. There was no break, and the making a TV show is so many hours. A 12-hour day is a kind of a short day, and so the writers at least kind of went right into coming up with a new show about. Usually there's like we just wrapped. We wrapped the filming, the actual post-production and editing and all that will take us into January. And if we get a second season, we'll start that up in March. So you get like a 6 to 8 weeks off, and you really need them.
Yeah.
And we didn't get that on the new show, so it became a tougher production. And then you throw in COVID and having to work in a bubble. I didn't tell them I flew home for 20 hours to watch the Stanley Cup Finals. Luckily, I didn't get infected, and I didn't infect anybody, but that could have been a big scandal. I'm surprised I'm even talking about it publicly. But I like to say I was there when they won the cup. So.
I have another question about Lincoln Lawyer. Where's that going to be?
That's on Netflix. And again, my guess is March to June. That's a 10-episode show, just like the Bosch spinoff. And Netflix obviously drops all their shows at once, so you can binge that. IMDb, they haven't decided how they're going to deliver their shows, whether it will be all at once or 3 here, 3 there, that kind of thing. A lot of stuff is not known about IMDb at this point.
We have a challenge for you. If there are if there are writers for TV shows, what do you do on the set?
Wait, say that again?
If there are writers for the TV shows, what do you do on the set?
You bask in ego, like I wrote this scene, do it right. No, we always have, if you write an episode, you're supposed to quote unquote produce that episode. That means be on set in case there are questions. And, that actors will have stuff, the actors will want to change a line, or they'll want clarification on what's my emotion here, that kind of thing. And TV is a writer's medium, so those kind of things go to the writer in concert with the director, but directors come in and go, like, different ones for different episodes. So it's quite different from film. Like in film, those kind of questions would go to a director, and oftentimes they don't want the writer even on set, but it's a requirement in TV. But you sit in your little director's chair with your name on it, and act like you know something about what's going on.
I do that at work every day.
Yeah.
She does.
Can you tell us what characters besides Maddie will carry over to the spinoff?
The 3 main characters are Maddie, Money Chandler, the lawyer, and Bosch, of course. And then I'm not going to get into it because I think that will be fun. You'll see some people will drop in that you've seen before when you least expect it. So I'm not going to talk about it. But those are the 3 recurring roles on the show.
We have a viewer with a plot idea. Murder at a King's game versus the Lightning, or a Lightning player caught up in a murder after a game.
Sounds good.
I'm just sharing.
How do you get LA cops into that plot? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, Kings.
The Kings.
Kings is the LA game.
They're thinking around it.
It'd be more like a writer wearing a Tampa Bay Lightning sweater to the Kings game, which is always dangerous, which I've done for the game in LA.
I don't think you guys have a
murdered.
video of me, but my son has made several cameos, which Colette is familiar with. But so we're getting, there was a demand to name a character after my son, which
Oh,
we won't make you do. Totally unrelated question. We know that you have graduated with a BSJ from UF in 1980. Which quarter did you graduate? It's a
Which
very
quarter?
specific. Yes.
that's weird. It must be someone who was there.
I believe
Summer.
so.
Probably the Alumni Association.
Yeah, the
Summer,
summer.
there you go.
Yeah, like I think I graduated like something like May 28th, and on June 4th, I started working at the Daytona Beach News Journal.
All right, I've got one more book question, and I think then we have descended into Go Gaithers. So why does Renee sleep on the beach?
I just wanted, good question, but in the new book, she doesn't do that anymore. But I was looking for something different. And remember, I told you this is a single source inspired character. And I wish I could say I was a creative genius who thought, like, I'm going to have her sleep on the beach. That's what the real life detective did. And she had a home, but it was pretty far away. So I kind of massaged it a little bit, but she used to finish her midnight shift and go surf, have a tent on the beach, take a nap afterwards, but then eventually go to a brick and mortar home. I kind of left that part out. But it was just, inspired by the real person. And in fact, the first draft of the first book, I gave it to her. I give all the first drafts to her. Her name's Mitzi Roberts. And she vets it and says, I wouldn't do this, I would do this, all that. And she's the one who read that and go like, you need a dog. You need a dog to watch her stuff while she's surfing. And so then I had a dog, and that's why, Ballard loves dogs. Again, it wasn't my creativity. It was an order from the detective who inspired the character.
Will you have any cameos on the new show?
I didn't this time. Yeah, it just never came up.
With the cops and lawyers that tell you about stories, do you pay them, or are they just talking to you?
They're paid consultants on the show, and I do some stuff where like I pay for the vetting of it, of a book or a manuscript. So yeah, I would feel really bad that I'm taking their gold and running to the bank with it. So I try to be as fair about that as I can. And I don't know if it's sad. I was about to say the sad thing is that, but whatever it is, they don't know what they're giving me. They don't know how good these stories are in terms of emotion and showing a fierceness about what they do and a nobility about what they do. I'm always like struck by that. Like, you don't understand what you just told me, that story, that kind of thing. And then to see it end up in a book or on a TV show, I'd really feel bad if they weren't compensated in some way.
Seems very fair. We just have a lot of thanks rolling in, and I will echo that and throw it back to Colette.
All right. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Michael, for responding to all those questions. Thank you so much for being here and letting us launch the book.
Yeah.
Which is terrific.
This is several festivals in a row, right?
It is, yeah. I should have counted up how many, but it is several, and I hope more to come.
Yeah, glad to do it.
Hope it'll be easier next time.
Next time, everyone can try to fit into Tombolo
Tombolo
Books.
Books.
Yeah.
And thanks so much to Tombolo Books who made this happen. and for everything else that they do. We really appreciate them. And thank you so much to the audience for tuning in. And please remember that the festival continues through this week. Tomorrow night, we'll have Honoré Fanon Jeffers. On Thursday, we'll have Books and Bourbon with Lisa Unger and Ace Atkins. On Friday, we'll have Florida nonfiction writer Cynthia Barnett and Craig Pittman. On Saturday, we'll have crime fiction writer Michael Corita. And on Sunday, we will have this year's Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction, Louise Erdrich. I hope you'll be able to join us. We've had a terrific lineup so far and a terrific night tonight. And thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.